He is a Al Jazeera producer. He's been on Chapo Trap House as well. I'm giving him a call right now. Hopefully he can pick up. Oh, there it is. Perfect. I see you. Can you hear me, Mohammed?
Yo, hey Hasan, how's it going, man?
All right. It's going all right. How about yourself? How are you doing?
I'm good. It's nice to be on with a fellow Arab.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm Turkish, which is what I don't know if you were watching.
I know. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, someone was saying that I'm obviously biased because I'm Arab. All right, so you won't be able to see me, but you can hear me, and if you're watching the stream, you can see me there, I guess. But I'm just gonna pop you in here. Here's Mohammad
Nice.
Alsaafin. I've been doing coverage on Gaza endlessly throughout this entire process for the past I guess what day are we on now? 68, 69, 70th
70,
day?
74.
74th day, holy, pretty much for
Yeah.
74 days straight. And in that time frame, the death toll that we know of, the official death toll that we know of from the Gazan Health Ministry, has reached more than 18,000. I think it's like, what, 18,700?
I just think it just broke 19,000 today, actually.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
unsurprising. One thing that I think has changed, obviously, is the attitude that the broader population has, the appetite that the broader population in the Western world has for the continuation of the latest siege. However, an attitude shift even in Israel as well. It seems like with you had much smaller movements against the Israeli government from the hostage families that were demanding a ceasefire, from groups such as Stand Together. I'm gonna look up their name, Ombim Beyachad, that were protesting, and yet since the 3 Israeli hostages were killed by the Israeli occupying forces, that protest movement has grown dramatically in Israel. I mean, what's your assessment 74 days in to what's happening?
Um, yeah, I mean, it depends by which measure you want to measure this, right? If you're a member of the Israeli right wing and you have these fantasies of destroying Gaza and leveling it, and turning it into a parking lot and settling it with Israeli settlers, then it seems to be going well. Massive chunks of the territory have been absolutely destroyed. It's apocalyptic, especially in the north. When this is over, it's going to be very, very difficult to see how people will be able to go back and pick up their lives. But that's not an accident. I mean, the Israeli defense minister said at the outset, Gaza is going to become a place where people cannot live. And they seem to be doing well in that regard. In regards to the other objectives of freeing the hostages or defeating Hamas, I think we're seeing that they're not doing very well in that count at all. Destruction of civilian population and civilian infrastructure does not at all equate to destruction of a guerrilla army, which is what Hamas is right now in Gaza. Even in areas that the Israelis have been in and have been in for more than a month now with their tanks and infantry. Hamas is still putting out videos every other day showing them attacking and hitting Israeli tanks and Israeli soldiers in those areas. So the Israelis have not been able to control any part of Gaza. They have succeeded in cutting it up. But the humanitarian situation is an absolute disaster, man. Today, Human Rights Watch, I don't know if you saw this, Human Rights Watch came out with reports saying that Israel is using starvation as a tool of war. I mean, this is medieval shit.
Yeah,
And yeah, and it just brought to mind John Kirby yesterday, the National Security Council spokesman, getting up on a podium and saying, "Hey, this will be over if Hamas surrenders." I mean, basically co-signing war crimes as U.S. policy.
yeah. Um, I mean, that's America co-signing war crimes as a part of U.S. policy is pretty commonplace. It's just that
Yeah.
what I mean, look, you've been covering Israel Palestine for quite some time. What do you think is different overall from a more macro perspective? Like I feel I can't help but notice that there is definitely more support for Palestinians in the Western world, especially in the under 35 demographic across the board
Yeah.
than ever before. In the last 10 years of at least my outspoken advocacy, I can see from my own personal experience that there's definitely an attitude change. And I feel like this attitude change is legitimately causing some of the Western-facing propaganda outlets to, I guess, take a more aggressive stance in some instances and try to look for more punitive measures towards anyone that's talking about Palestinian liberation. But I mean, it's certainly different, and I want to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, what I'm seeing is that the Israelis have always been very careful traditionally with the way they present themselves to the world, especially when it comes to military operations and the conduct of their military. I mean, the go-to line for them has always been, we don't attack civilians, the Israeli army is the most moral army in the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the bloodlust that has taken over Israeli leadership and the backing, the unconditional backing, repeated public unconditional backing it received from primarily the United States, the Biden administration, but also its allies in Europe, has allowed kind of that mask to flip. Beyond that, what we're seeing is, despite the fact, I mean, this is something that needs to be talked about a lot more, despite the fact that there are no international journalists in Gaza being stopped from entering by both Egypt and Israel. 74 days into what is the biggest story on the planet, there are no foreign journalists in there. Absolutely insane. But we are seeing from incredibly brave local journalists who have paid the ultimate price, many of them. I think up to 90 now, or over 90 Palestinian journalists in Gaza have been killed. Sorry, I think 90 overall, over 70 in Gaza, as well as many who've lost members of their families in targeted strikes on their homes. They're getting the story out. But beyond that, I think also when we talk about the generational divide here, most people kind of under 35 don't sit around and get their news from CNN or MSNBC anymore, right? They get it from their feeds, they get it from social media, they get it from, and those feeds are chock full of live reporting, unfiltered from the ground in Gaza. You know, the people in Gaza use TikTok and Instagram the same way people all over the world do. And so they're recording what they're seeing and they're sharing it, and everyone else is seeing it. And there's just absolutely no way you can spin the shit that people are seeing. And I think that is the prime reason why we're seeing such a huge shift. Not only that people are seeing things live and unfiltered, but it's also happening at a time when this is a world historical level of destruction, especially when we're talking about the last few decades. I think the Washington Post reported that the rate of killing of children and women is higher than in any other conflict, I think, going back to World War II. There's only so much you can tell people and try to rationalize this shit before people are like, I mean, I'm seeing women and children being killed and blown up. There's nothing more to it.
Yeah. That definitely factors into it. Like, the brutality this time around certainly is causing more people to pay attention and creating this attitude shift, it seems. So beyond that, I wanted to specifically focus on some of the latest things that have happened with respect to the Israeli occupying force and its operations in Gaza. The three Israeli hostages were shot and killed as they were retreating. They had clearly communicated that they were hostages. They didn't have T-shirts on, and this seems like it's at least caused somewhat of an attitude shift even inside of Israel, because obviously, like, the Israeli population broadly, at least when you look at the polling, doesn't necessarily care. Like, the Israeli Jewish population doesn't necessarily care about Palestinian civilians being slaughtered. But when that same Israeli occupying force is turning its crosshairs directly, not indirectly with the indiscriminate bombing campaign, which is easier to hide at least, but directly on the Israeli hostages by shooting them in broad daylight as they're retreating, all of a sudden that makes it seem a little bit less justifiable, and it's caused a big uproar as far as I understand it. So I guess the question I have is, do you feel like this will lead to a cessation inevitably of hostilities, or do you think Israel is going to keep going as aggressively as they have?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that there are two factors keeping the current rate of brutality in this operation. One is, like I mentioned before, the unlimited support from the U.S. government. I mean, we're talking about a continuous U.S. Defense Department talks about a continuous air bridge of weapons and bombs being supplied to Israel. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has gone around Congress to authorize, sending over tens of thousands of new tank shells to Israel, avoiding congressional oversight. The Biden administration is all in on this. And the Biden administration is the main supplier of the bombs that are being dropped in Gaza. If that tap gets turned off, that faucet gets turned off, and this war ends very quickly. On the other hand, the pressure from Israeli society is going to be interesting to see, because one thing I did notice was in Netanyahu's remarks to the Israeli public, the Israeli Jewish public, about the killing of the 3 hostages by the Israeli army, was that he expressed his regret, but then he quickly pivoted and said that I know, the families of the hostages want to negotiate a resolution and get these hostages out through a prisoner swap, but the families of soldiers who have been killed have asked me to keep going. So he's now kind of putting the trying to paint the families of the hostages as unpatriotic and unwilling to continue the battle that he wants to continue. So it will be interesting to see how much of a shift that portends in Israeli society. I don't know how much your viewers are aware of this, but Netanyahu is extremely unpopular right now.
Yeah.
And that historically has not been the case. Historically, he's been one of the most popular political figures in Israel. He's the longest serving prime minister of Israel over multiple terms. As recently as October the 6th of this year, he seemed to be kind of unbeatable, consolidated his power, was making major changes to Israeli laws that we're seeing, hundreds of thousands of Israelis out in the streets opposing him without getting anywhere. But the fact of the matter is, and this is something Israelis talk about in the American media, we don't talk about it very often, but Israelis know that the people ultimately responsible for the security failures of October 7th were the political and security establishment of the country. So Netanyahu is on borrowed time. He knows that. It's in his interest to continue this as long as possible, to prolong it. Same for his defense minister, who, as the guy who was in charge of the army that collapsed on October 7th, is also going to be held accountable. But I think the Israeli public that is interested, like is genuinely interested in getting the hostages back and does not use them as a rhetorical tool to just keep bombing Gaza, knows that over 100 hostages did come back and they were released in a prisoner swap, which is what Hamas has said is the only way to get them out. The reason they were taken, they took hostages is because Israel holds tens of thousands of Palestinians prisoner, and no one cares about them. No fuss is made about those prisoners, including captives who've been held without charge or trial for years, including children, including women. And so Hamas says, the only way that your prisoners come out is if our prisoners come out. And we're ready to make a deal. We're ready to do a comprehensive deal, get them all out, or we can do this piecemeal. And I think the Israelis went for that. They said women and children first, and then men, and then soldiers. The bombing campaigns haven't really led to the release of of any of the hostages. Hamas says that several of them have already been killed in the bombings. This was before the 3 that Israel admitted it had accidentally killed. And so the issue of hostages is something that is going to be key. It's going to result in pressure, and we'll see how that goes.
Beyond that, there's also international pressure mounting against Israel because of their indiscriminate bombing and shooting campaign upon the Palestinian population. There were 2 women that were killed by, I believe, either drone snipers, the Israeli drone snipers, or direct sniper fire that were Christian Palestinian, 2 Christian Palestinian grandmothers, if I'm not mistaken. And that is like, things like that end up, I guess, personalizing the violence for different sects of the population that are primed into seeing the Palestinians as like a horde of barbaric, anti-Semitic, monstrous Muslims that America has primed the Western world into believing is the case for all Muslims and all Arabs in general due to our war on terror propaganda, racist, agitated propaganda. So I feel like that is also changing the dynamic a little bit. But from my perspective, it does seem like any time Israel is like losing the propaganda war with its actions, they just kind of shut off the internet and shut off telecommunications and continue mercilessly bombing and mercilessly shooting people, and then apprehending as many people in dragnets as possible. We have now found out that the civilians that they are apprehending, many of them are just simply, UN officials or UN workers, UNRWA workers, teachers, doctors that are being staged to appear as though they are, Al-Qassam brigade fighters or whatnot, to show the to show internally inside of Israel that there are victories to be had here, and it's not simply Israeli commanders being wiped out, or their Golani brigade losing a third of its like reservists or whatever. And do you think that this plays a role in the war becoming less popular in Israel, or do you feel like it's different this time around? The attitudes that people have because October 7 like truly changed something, and it doesn't matter. Like they will keep throwing bodies at the problem.
Yeah, I mean, are you talking specifically about attitudes in Israel or globally?
Both.
Yeah, so I mean, in Israel, I think what people need to understand is before October 7th, the reality in Israel and Israeli politics is very different from how it's often presented to us in the West, which is of Israel as being this kind of liberal democracy that's in this oasis of democracy in a barbaric Middle East. Israel's an apartheid state.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the jumping off point when we're discussing Israeli society and Israeli politics. Israel's an apartheid state. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, the United Nations, B'Tselem, plenty of organizations have written detailed report on why that is. It's not just a slogan. You can read them. I've read them. They're very, very detailed into what makes this country an apartheid state. It's run by a extremely right wing. I mean, Israeli politics. When we talk about like the right wing in Israel, Trumpism in the United States would probably be seen as pretty centrist in Israel, right?
Yeah.
Amongst all democracies in the world, I would say Israel is probably the most right wing, fascist adjacent country right now.
Absolutely.
And has been for several years, right? I mean, you have people in the current Israeli coalition who are open fascists, open racists, who say that they are proud to be so. You've got people like Itamar Ben-Gvir, who was seen as so racist and so kind of outside the scope of acceptable society in Israel during the 90s and early 2000s that the Israeli army, the same army that we're seeing conduct all this brutality in Gaza, refused to let him serve when it was time for him to come up with mandatory service because they were like, this guy is too extreme, right?
Yeah.
2 decades on, this guy is now the head of, is the Minister of Interior in Israel. He's in charge of the police, he's in charge of national security. And so when we talk about attitudes changing in Israel, we got to take into account, especially post October 7th, we got to take into account what the starting off point was. For many Israelis, the Palestinians were invisible before October 7th, right? I lived in the West Bank during the early 2000s, right after the end of the Second Intifada, and during the construction of the separation wall that the Israelis put up in the West Bank. The regime of checkpoints and walls in the West Bank and the barrier and siege around Gaza meant that for the vast majority of Israelis, they never see a Palestinian. They never have to deal with a Palestinian, especially Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza. The issues that Palestinians were dealing with under Israeli military occupation are completely invisible to the vast majority of the Israeli public. Right? The line that kind of the Israelis have been going with, including centrists, not just Netanyahu's right wing, but including people like Yesh Atid's Lapid, who's seen as kind of like this more dovish figure in current Israeli politics, is that they don't want to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They just want to manage the occupation. They just want to, Israel paying very little price for this occupation of keeping 5 million people under occupation. There's very little pressure on them to change their policies. And so October 7th wasn't just a shock because of the violence that was inflicted upon Israelis, but because for many Israelis, Palestinians were very much out of sight, out of mind. We're talking about this year, the big story before October 7th I mentioned was the judicial overthrow, the judicial coup that Netanyahu's right-wing allies were trying to implement in Israel. And there were weeks and weeks of massive protests, hundreds of thousands of Israelis in the streets. What they were protesting against was this idea that Netanyahu was going to undermine the rule of law and democracy in Israel. None of those protests took into account the fact that Israel was ruling over 5 million people who had absolutely no right. So the attitude of Israelis towards this war, I think, is not ever going to be measured, unfortunately, and I'm talking here in a general sense. Obviously, there are going to be Israelis who feel maybe differently, but they're a very, very, very small minority. But the vast majority of Israelis will look at this war and the results of this war by what it can do in terms of destroying Gaza and destroying Hamas. Destroying Gaza as a place, like I said, that seems to be going well. Destroying Hamas is not. And so at the end of the day, the Israelis were going to be forced to stop. You got to get the hostages out. And the world is getting sick of this, right?
Yeah.
The Europeans, they're becoming more vocal about this. There's going to be, I think, another vote at the UN tomorrow about a ceasefire. So we'll see how that goes. But for Israeli society, I think things have changed massively post October 7th. The biggest change, I think, that we're going to see long term is the fact that they can no longer ignore the Palestinians that live under their occupation.
I'm gonna show this video really quickly, and then I'll get back to you in a second. You can watch it as well.
Killing of evidently vulnerable
And I have to go pee
innocent
really quickly.
people
Sorry.
seems to me to set back what Israel says it's trying to achieve.
What explanation could there be?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know about the management of soldiers in uniform and the discipline that they should be exercising. But we've seen in a number of ways that discipline has broken down. And these would appear to be just random shootings. So I hope those responsible for it, because this is a structured army, will be held to account for what they've done.
You wouldn't go as far as how the Pope has described the situation. Incredibly strong language from the Holy Father saying that it was a terrorist attack.
Well, I'm not sure the technicalities, frankly. This is the army of a state. So I would prefer to say it was a cold-blooded killing. And what is so terrible is it's just one example of what would seem to be many, but one example that touches me deeply and one example from which we have some very objective evidence.
The Israeli Defense Force says it didn't happen, wasn't them?
Well, I think that's hard to believe, frankly, because the people in Gaza and the Cardinal Archbishop of Jerusalem, they're not given to tell lies.
So you don't believe the Israeli Defense Force?
No, I don't.
Talk to me about the conditions inside that compound at the moment.
Well, it's hard to imagine, actually. It's quite a limited compound. There are a number of buildings. There's the church, there's the house where the priest lives, the sisters, the hostel that they have, a hall. And it's hard to know. The last reports were that the basic water supply, as it was running with a pump, the pump has been broken. They're resourceful people, but I think they will now be afraid to go outside that compound onto the street. It's just very difficult to know what is going to happen.
I think the more this kind of coverage occurs in the Western media, the less support Israel will get from the populations. Obviously, that's very different from the actual, the movers and shakers. The actual politicians will probably offer unconditional support as long as they can. But I do think that this is what puts a time limit on the ongoing siege more than anything else. That's at least my suspicion. Maybe I'm being a little bit too optimistic about it, but I do feel like this is unheard of or unimaginable, at least in my experience in prior conflicts. You covered in your piece, what does Hamas actually want? The Great March of Return, right?
Yeah.
Tens of thousands wounded, hundreds shot and killed by Israeli sniper fire, acts of violence against a civilian population protesting peacefully that the Western world rarely ever covered with the same interest, I would say. And I think that, I mean, this makes it unmanageable for Israel to maintain its level of support for as long as it has.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, look, man, you look at people like Biden, and I think for people like Joe Biden, supporting Israel, right or wrong, is a reflexive attitude, right? And it's a generational thing. People of a certain generation, for them, Israel was a miracle. It was the miracle of kind of like the redemption miracle after the Holocaust. And, we got to support this country to the hilt because no matter what, and Biden says insane shit that you can't get away with saying about any other country or any other people when he says things like, if it wasn't for Israel, then no Jew in the world would be safe. You're the president of the United States. Half the world Jews live in your country. What do you mean by that? Right? But going back to people like under 30, and the polls are showing this, people are seeing, like, first of all, people don't have that emotional attachment to this kind of redemptive idea of Israel as kind of the rebirth of the Jewish people after the Holocaust, because they're not 70 years old, but also they are seeing what the state of Israel actually does. They're seeing the worst tendencies of the state. And one thing, like we were talking about Israeli propaganda and how it seems to kind of be slipping. And I said how, Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank use TikTok and Instagram the same way everyone else in the world does. And so people are getting an insight into their reality. Another thing that I think is not being paid a lot of attention to is the fact that Israelis do the same thing. And we're seeing some crazy shit come out of there.
Yes.
Soldiers, I'm sure you've seen some of this stuff. Soldiers kind of, posting TikToks of them abusing Palestinian prisoners, TikTok challenges where people with their kids like replicate arresting Palestinians and forcing them to sing and dance. Insane, right? And this turns people off. This is not stuff that, especially as on the other side, people are seeing what your tanks and warplanes are doing. This is not stuff that is gonna endear you to a new generation of people.
Making fun of the Palestinian civilians not having electricity or water early on. And then like serialized the serialized content, like making a TikTok trend out of like apprehending Palestinian civilians in the West Bank was like, this was early on. Now it seemingly has not actually changed like the OPSEC within the Israeli occupying force at all, which I find really strange, because you have the groups such as the 72 Virgins group that was managed by the IDF that openly promoted this kind of like racist, vitriolic propaganda internally within Israel, because they know that like racist agitprop is a necessity to maintain the occupation and maintain the bombing, so that there's support for it. It's not as popular as the original group, which has I believe 100,000 followers on the Telegram.
100,000 out of a population of just under 6 million, by the way.
Yeah.
That is an insane number of people. I don't know if your viewers I don't know if you've spoken about what's in this group, this Telegram group, or this Telegram channel, but it's just sick, right? It's basically the stuff that people are seeing that's horrifying them, of bodies being blown up, torn apart. They're being posted with glee in these Telegram groups.
And being celebrated by the Israeli population.
Celebrated. By massive groups that it's just very disturbing.
I think about that a lot. Like I'm sure there are like Russian groups not dissimilar to this, but like to the same severity, to the same like percentage of the population. Russia's a massive country, obviously. Like that would be nonstop, round the clock Western news coverage about like, the barbarity of the Russians and how they're orcs, how they're all orcs, and how much they're celebrating like the fucking death and destruction of Ukraine. But of course, when Israel's doing it, there's like not a peep from the Western media, not even a little bit of like intellectual curiosity from Western media, which I talk to my friends who are journalists and like legacy publishers all the time about this sort of thing, because I don't understand it. One example I used was, for example, when the ceasefire ended, and there were the communications coming from inside of Gaza from the Al-Qassam brigades, and also through Hamas members, that openly stated that the end of the talks did not come because they were refusing to give up any hostages, but instead the remaining female hostages were actually, IDF. And now the thing is, I did not confirm this, but I'm also not a journalist, right? And I did not see a single journalist look at that and run that information against what we know already, whether or not those were actually IDF soldiers were not or not. And that blows my mind that the media coverage on that, the end of the ceasefire, was whatever Israel had said at the time, which was, they don't want to give up any more female hostages, and maybe they don't want to give up female hostages because they raped them. The implication that that the Hamas militants had raped the female hostages and were hiding the truth, and it got so out of hand with Matt Miller openly speculating as an official arm of the American government that the IDF had to come out and say, you can't say this, you're, that's insane. Do not repeat this information. This is unsubstantiated. So I think that you're absolutely correct. The barbarity of the Israeli occupying forces is also playing a role here. I wanted to show you one these videos. As a matter of fact, there's the chat. Do you guys have the Jenin? The soldiers like smoking hookah, the Israeli occupying force like smoking hookah in Jenin, talking about like what they plan to do with Jenin. I believe like it's a recent
What they want to do
video.
in Gaza. Yeah.
Yeah, what
That
they're
video
doing.
came out yesterday.
Yeah, I'm trying to find that right now so I can show it to the chat as well. Let me see.
Yeah, well,
Oh, here
while
it is.
you're
Here
looking
it's
for
from
him,
Middle East Eye. Here. I'll show you right here. A video of Israeli soldiers in Jenin has gone viral, showing them smoking a hookah, presumably looted, and mocking Palestinian detainees, according to local sources. The soldiers are heard joking about future vacations and sexual exploits in Gaza's beaches. I mean, this is like serialized Abu Ghraib torture, basically.
That's the stuff I keep thinking about. Like, I keep thinking about how Abu Ghraib was like this massive scandal that really changed everyone's attitude towards the Iraq War and shaped the way people saw that conflict for an entire generation. And that was one thing. With the Israeli forces, we're seeing something every other day come out like this.
Yeah, whether it be like ruining the schools and like ripping up like children's schoolwork and saying like it's over for you, or even using symbolism of Judaism to justify your military conquest and like partnering that, which should be gross to Jews all around the world, like and yet all the criticisms against that from anti-Zionist Jews, for example, are met with resistance in the American media, where they are considered to be like anti-Semitic unconditionally and across the board. It blows my mind. The writing of the names on missiles is another one, but that's a classic. Everybody does that. I think it's a gross practice in general, but it's like one that is super commonplace. Ukrainians did it, Russians do it. Everybody does that shit. And you're absolutely correct, though. Like it seems as though the Israeli occupying force does not even try to hide these kinds of TikToks and videos coming out, and even supports it to a degree, at least within the Israeli population, because they consider this to be like good and beneficial to the morale.
It's morale boosting. Yeah, I mean, look, man, when I spoke about how right wing Israeli society has become over the last few decades, when you become that right wing, you also become very insular, right? And when you're able to do the shit you do for decades with impunity, then you lose touch a little bit with what turns people off and what people think is disgusting and gross.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are saying, like, I'm seeing a breakdown in discipline in the Israeli army because this stuff keeps coming out. And I'm just thinking, no, because the people in the Israeli army and the people in the Israeli government actually don't, for the most part, realize the cost this is having on their image around the world. Because to them, this is the stuff that gets celebrated in Israeli society, especially amongst right-wing Israelis.
I've actually heard from liberal Zionists more talking specifically about this, trying to warn right-wing Israelis, like, listen, we're aligned with you on this. We're aligned with it. Like, Hamas must be, eviscerated. But what you're doing, showcasing these videos, make you look like an inhumane, barbarian piece of shit to the Western world. And they're right. Liberal Zionists are always on the money when it comes to how Israeli propaganda should be conducted, but their voices are deafened in the conversation as well, and it's unironically hurting Israel in general.
For sure. Just I'll let you finish the video, but like another example of it is we're not just talking about soldiers here. We're talking about the people that Israel has chosen to represent it at the highest global stage, right? So an example, the Israeli ambassador to the UK, CPO12, she's on the BBC, Channel 4, Sky every day trying to make the case for Israel. And this woman is just not doing a good job of selling her case. Let's put it that way. She goes on there, she starts yelling and berating anyone who asks her about a two-state solution. The Israeli line that was always told to the West was like, we want a two-state solution with the Palestinians, And she's just going on there and she's pulling a Netanyahu and she's like, no way. There's no way we're going to ever allow a Palestinian state. And you see in real time a lot of these kind of mainstream journalists who just like reacting with like incredulity. Like, what are you talking about? This is not what you're supposed to say. You're not supposed to say that, right? And And
It feels like.
for
Did
people
you
like
ever see
Dippy,
this? Did you ever see that? Sorry to cut you off, but did you ever
no,
see
go ahead.
Kanye West when he was doing the rounds on like Alex Jones and like was being insanely anti-Semitic and like saying he loves Hitler and stuff? And you had these right-wing commentators like Alex Jones and everyone else go, "No, no, no, you're not supposed to say that, Kanye. Like
Don't say the
we
quiet part
agree
out
with
loud.
you. Yeah, you're not supposed to say
Yeah.
the quiet part out loud." I feel like there's an identical situation happening in like Western media where they have an Israeli official, especially more prominent in like I would say the UK than even America, where like you have people in America like at least sometimes offer criticism towards like Concreus or whatever the dude's name is, but like in the UK you have like these Tories who are hyper. They're ultra right wing. They're ultra nationalist for Israel. They're ultra Zionist, and even they're like, no, you're not supposed to say that to the ambassador, like
Yeah.
in real time,
Yeah.
to correct her.
Yeah. But you know, the thing with her is she doesn't see that she's doing anything wrong because this plays to her audience back home really well. This is who she is. Like she didn't come out of nowhere. She's been a member of like the Likud for a long time, Netanyahu's party, and this is the stuff that in Hebrew, this is the stuff that plays. This is the stuff that goes, and it has been for years. Now she's saying it in English to an audience that wants to be sympathetic and is just getting basically spit on, right? The other one that comes to mind is the guy who's supposed to be your top diplomat, the ambassador to the UN, the guy who, when the UN Secretary General said something pretty tame by the standards of by the scale of what we're seeing in Gaza, said something like this is a war on children, or something like I've never seen a humanitarian situation this bad.
Yeah.
This guy comes out in the UN and accuses the UN Secretary General of being a member of Hamas and demands that he resign. I mean, that's not diplomacy. That's insanity. You're
Yeah, no,
showing an
absolutely.
insane face to the world.
I mean, he's also Gilad Erdan. He's the
He wore
one
the yellow
chat
star
that
as
he
well.
wore the yellow star, the Never Again star, because he was
Yeah.
saying it's his own personal Holocaust if he can't kill Palestinian children, which is an insane thing to say. But then also, he's the one who famously said, "UN is Hamas," UNRWA is Hamas, and these are terror children. Like he's got a lot of
Everything's
incredible
Hamas, man.
quotes. And
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think like when your entire like soft power resembles Benjamin Netanyahu, who is not a leader that American like American politicians have ever even favored realistically, regardless of how much they've supported Israel because of our own material interest in Israel being like a forward operating base or an unsinkable aircraft carrier. Many politicians in America have said time and time again, with I guess the exception of Donald Trump, that Netanyahu is a piece of shit and sucks. And I feel like the more unfavorable you look to the rest of the world, the especially when you're simultaneously also signaling to the rest of the world that like you don't give a shit and that you're not going to conduct yourself as the most moral army at all, and you've completely cast aside that notion that like that kind of propaganda is important, you're done. You're gonna end up losing support slowly but surely.
Yeah, I mean, Hasan, that's one of the reasons why, at the end of the video, I said that, clearly there won't be a return to pre-October 7th. And there's so many meanings to that. It's not just in terms of how Israel feels about Hamas or about Gaza, but also how the world feels about Israel, right? They've walked into kind of this, I don't want to say it's a trap, but they could have prosecuted this a million different ways. And they chose the way that plays the most to their base, but is also simultaneously probably the least effective on multiple levels. Least effective militarily, least effective politically, least effective in terms of garnering global sympathy. You got to remember, like, I mean, it feels like a long time ago now, but man, the days after October 7th, the entire world was like, we're with you guys, we're behind Israel, right? It felt very much like the days after 9/11 here in the US. And they've taken this global sympathy and just squandered it on blowing up schools and hospitals and churches and mosques and universities and homes. The hospital stuff, man. Like, for weeks we had the lead up to the Israeli attack on the Shifa hospital. You remember the Israeli army spokesman who was like, we're going to reveal the intelligence showing you guys that this is the Hamas command base. And it was just like a shitty 3D graphic of like tunnels that were supposedly under the hospital. And then they go in and they spend 2 weeks in there and they show you a couple of AK-47s and a box of dates, and then they leave. And all the people, including in the mainstream media, who kind of bought this line and went with it and parroted it and promoted it. And I was like, there was all these articles like in the New York Times, like, attacking hospitals is usually a violation of international law, but in some cases it's permissible. They didn't say anything when the Israelis left without showing where this supposed Hamas base was. And now what we're seeing, because there were no consequences to the attack on Shifa, every single hospital in Gaza is being systematically attacked.
Yeah.
Right? Every single hospital in the north is being besieged and taken out of service. Doctors are being arrested. Patients are being attacked. The generators are being blown up. These hospitals are going out of service. The last one was the Kamal Adwan hospital, which was under siege for almost 10 days. The doctors in there were begging people to save the patients. There was no reaction from the world. And then they went in and they bulldozed the place. Reports were that some of the people who were kind of sheltering in tents in the grounds of the hospital were bulldozed by Israeli bulldozers and buried alive. It's too horrific to even countenance what that was like for the people there. But just today, they went to the Baptist hospital, surrounded it, and demanded all the doctors and hospital staff leave, and left just 4 doctors and nurses in there. There's no military. There's no military objective to this. All they're doing is taking out anything that would allow people to maintain a semblance of life in northern Gaza, especially.
Yeah, the World Health Organization chief has condemned is the Israeli raid on the Kamal Adwan hospital in Gaza, the one that you were just talking about, saying that they're shocked over the extensive damage which rendered the hospital non-functional and has called for an immediate ceasefire. Now, one thing I am concerned about is that on Al-Ahli, right?
Yeah.
On the explosion in Al-Ahli, the understandable immediate reaction is that, okay, this is another Israeli bombing campaign. The death toll is much higher than usual. However, it was yet another Israeli operation, right? And at the time, the back and forth was Israel would never attack a hospital. Now, of course, there might still be questions on what has happened, even though the American media immediately were like, nope, Israel is right. They definitely are correct. We saw the faked phone conversation or whatever. It must be Islamic Jihad. It must be.
But you weren't convinced by that phone call?
Well, no, I'm not. I wait, no, not me. I'm saying, I'm saying that
phone call didn't convince you, man.
Yeah, I'm saying that they were immediately. People were like, well, first of all, I'm as you know, I'm Turkish, so I remember the Mavi Marmara phone call. So the fake one from Mavi Marmara. So I. That once I saw that, I actually didn't even know that existed. But once I saw the Mavi Marmara one, I don't know if you've ever heard that one. I will most likely never believe in another Israeli phone call ever again, because it was the funniest thing. It was literally a dude with like an American accent being like, "Oh, 9/11, remember Auschwitz," and that was their post violence justification for why they attacked that humanitarian aid ship, the Turkish one. So my point was, in Al-Ahli, a hospital that they had actually shelled 2 days prior, a hospital whose staff they had told need to evacuate immediately because they were going to attack it, everyone said, oh my God, Israel would never attack a hospital. Israel has attacked every hospital before then and since then. And then Al-Shifa happened, and then Israel said, oh, Hamas actually attacked Al-Shifa, we promise. And then there was actually a New York Times report that came out and showed, no, it was actually Israel that attacked Al-Shifa. And then Israel said, okay, well, there's a Hamas headquarters underneath it. And everyone was like, okay, maybe it might be permissible to attack the Al-Shifa hospital because, like, there's a Hamas headquarters underneath it. Who knows, right? And now, since then, they've attacked a shit ton of hospitals, including Kamal Adwan, like you said, in increasingly more violent ways. And yet, it does seem like the Western media is relatively quiet in comparison to how much chatter occurred in the Al-Ahli hospital explosion, and then the Al Shifa hospital siege. Now it's seen as a commonplace practice from the Israeli occupying force, and that, in my opinion, is terrifying.
It's terrifying because of the precedent it sets for the rest of the world,
Yes.
right? There's a lot of things that have happened in this war that, everyone in the world, every military in the world is looking at this and saying, well, if the Israelis could get away with killing 90 journalists, if the Israelis can get away with using starvation as a tool of war, if the Israelis can get away with attacking hospitals and forcing people out, then this is going to be kind of like the collapse of the liberal order that was set up post World War II. I mean, even Joe Biden alluded to this, right? And the incoherent words, statement he was making at a fundraiser a couple of weeks ago or 10 days ago, where he said, I told the Israelis, if you keep doing this, this is wrong and it's against international law. And Netanyahu apparently said something like, well, you bombed Germany and Japan, so in World War II. And Biden said that he replied by saying, and that was wrong, and that's why we set up all these rules and systems after World War II so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Biden's still sending the bombs, even as Israel does this. And so, genuinely, like, Hasan, this is one of the things. Like, I have family in Gaza, so this is immediately terrifying when I see the stuff happening day in, day out. But I'm also worried about like the future of our planet when whatever little limits were placed on military warfare and conflict have been completely thrown away, and we're going to be seeing really barbaric stuff happen if this isn't rectified anytime soon.
Yeah. Beyond the barbaric stuff that we're seeing in Gaza, as you've stated, here is an update from St. George Here's an update from the Ahli Anglican Hospital. Obviously, I hear that there is a staff being detained. It has been a great mercy for the many wounded in Gaza City that we were able to keep our Ahli Anglican hospital open for so long. That ended today. This morning, the Israeli army destroyed the wall of the Ahli's front entrance and detained most of the staff there. They left 2 junior doctors, 4 nurses, and 2 janitors to tend over the 100 seriously wounded patients, all with no running water and no electricity. An IDF tank is currently parked on the rubble of the hospital's entry wall, blocking all ingress and egress. If anyone reads this and has any political influence, please use it to try and save these patients and our abducted and extremely distressed hospital staff. Their very lives may now depend on forceful international intervention. I don't know how to put a stop to this at all from where I'm standing, because remember, this is the Al Ahli Hospital. It's just when Western media does not cover these things as it's occurring, and these international standards keep getting violated. I mean, obviously, I've always known it as a joke and it's not real, but like this severity is absolutely ridiculous, because as you said, it opens up the floodgates for everyone else to engage in said brutality as well. Just one more thing about kind of like Western media, mainstream media, let's say mainstream media or legacy media coverage of the hospital attacks. So what you read, the statement you read from the people, the staff at the hospital, it's very, very similar to what the staff at all the other hospitals put out just before they were taken over by the Israelis or attacked. Yeah. So clearly, like there's a modus operandi that the Israelis are following when it comes to the hospitals, right? What's interesting to me is seeing the complete disinterest by legacy media in this stuff. The only time they seemed to be really, really interested in the attacks on the hospitals was when it sounded like it was going to be like this epic firefight, right? When the Israelis were going into Shifa Hospital, which was supposedly the military headquarters of Hamas, where everyone was hiding and all the hostages were being held, and it was going to be this spectacular attack. And it turned out that wasn't the case, and there was no headquarters over there, and there were no leadership over there. Then everyone just kind of shrugged, and it was like, oh, okay, attack the hospitals. But there's nothing there that makes the story sexy or interesting. And that's a big failure of legacy media in the way it looks at this stuff. No, absolutely. Jacobin wrote, as Israel besieges the Al Auda hospital, war crimes in Gaza have become unremarkable, and that is correct. It's just like Like I mentioned over the weekend, shutting off the internet and like destroying a Peltel facility in like a month into the siege was considered inappropriate. The international community spoke out against it. Even Joe Biden said you have to restore communications. That's unacceptable. Over the course of this past weekend, as the conflict worsens, as the ethnic cleansing continues, Israel shut off communications for 4 days straight. For 4 days. And there was
communications just came back last night.
Yeah.
It was 4 days where almost everyone who had family in Gaza had absolutely no way of checking in on them, finding out what was going on. It's like you said, it's just become routine now.
Yeah, and it is so normalized at this point, and it blows my mind that people are not ferociously trying to stop this, to put an end to this in the Western world, and the media, I think, is complicit in refusing to cover the worst aspects of the horrifying war crimes that have become normal and commonplace here in Gaza. All right,
Hasan, did you read that 972 magazine article about Israel's use of AI?
Yeah, the gospel and also the
gospel,
4 tiers of the 4 different tiers are targeting. Yeah, I covered it extensively here. I mean, obviously, like before that, we had the Dahiyya doctrine. Like I've talked about that quite extensively as well. So like, I already know that this is or we are already aware that this was like the principle in the way that Israel lays sieges. It's just that the Plus 972 article openly showcased it and put it in a more contemporary setting, and yet even that I feel like made very little.
That's what I was going to say.
Very little impact, like, and that's an Israeli magazine. It's not like this is Human Rights Watch even at this point.
Right. I mean, the thing is, like, I think a lot of attention, the little attention that was paid to that magazine focused a lot on like the gospel and the use of AI. For me, I think the bigger story there was the fact that the Israelis were openly, well, like you said, the 4 tiers of targets.
Yeah.
And they were civilian targets, right? It was about civilian infrastructure. It was about targeting civilian infrastructure, creating, I think the quote was, a shock to the civilian population so that they rise up against Hamas, which, fantasy, that's not going to happen because that's not how populations react to having their shit bombed. But it was basically an open admission that civilian infrastructure and civilian targets are part of the Israeli the targets that Israel is firing on. And I didn't see a single mainstream legacy media organization take the story on, because if it does, that changes the conversation completely from what the story has been on cable news and on legacy media about the way they've covered this story from the beginning.
Yeah, it completely goes against everything that John Kirby has ever said. You can run that. You can run that article every single day. You can run that article every single day against John Kirby, against Matthew Miller, and all the State Department and NSC spokespeople every day of the week. And it should be done. That's what I mean. We have access journalism in America, obviously, so it will never be done. But that is what is supposed to happen in this circumstance. Here's another moment that I want to show you, and the audience as well. So obviously, it seems like every day of the week there is another American State Department official that like goes to Israel to be like, dog, dial it back. What the fuck are you doing? You're losing support from the international community. And it falls on deaf ears. And of course, here is Yoav Gallant, Israel's very own, we're fighting human animals. Yeah, the defense minister who famously said on October 8th, we're fighting human animals, and that's why we need to shut off the food, water, and electricity to Gaza as we lay siege. This is 11 seconds. This is very illustrative of the experience.
Would you say that Israel is on track for a strategic victory in Gaza?
You want me to go first?
Would you say that?
Yeah, where it's like, and they're not, and these questions have been raised since day one. What is Israel's plan? Is this a permanent occupation? Are we going to put the Palestinian Authority in place? Even though Palestinian Authority, as you know, as well as everyone in this community knows, as we've looked at the latest polling, is the least popular entity among the Palestinian population. Abbas is consistently around 7%. Hamas has reached its level of popularity that it's never experienced before, even though its popularity spikes during Israeli sieges, especially in the West Bank, even more so than Gaza. However, all this has done is solidify or even create more supporters of Hamas within the West Bank and within Gaza, while simultaneously everybody despises the Palestinian Authority because they understandably see it as another aspect of the Israeli security apparatus, the occupying force.
It is. Yep, and it's imposed by the United States. And this is, I mean, this speaks to, look, man, the Biden administration, one thing that it's really shown over the last 2 months is the people running policy on this are not very bright, right? They're just running back the worst aspects of the Bush era when it comes to trying to impose solutions, their preferred solutions on the Middle East. The Palestinian Authority has very little legitimacy or popularity, like you've said over and over again. What's not going to help that legitimacy is this notion of the PA coming back to Gaza after it's been destroyed by Israel. Like, that is not how you regain any popularity or legitimacy. And yeah, Hamas's popularity is going to grow because the interesting thing is, in the West over here, when we look at the coverage of the story of this war, it's presented as kind of Israel versus Hamas, even though we know it's Israel versus the Palestinian people in Gaza. But then Hamas is only seen through the lens of what it did on October 7th. The media in the West in general does not show what Hamas has done since then. Does not show Hamas fighters kind of going point blank range to attack Israeli tanks. Does not show the losses that the Israelis are suffering, the Israeli military is suffering inside Gaza. And in the Arab world and amongst Palestinians, they are seeing that. So for them, what they're seeing is Hamas is actually defending Gaza, defending Palestinians. For the first time, this is the first time in the history of this conflict that Palestinians have had a organization or an entity that is militarily able to kind of at least give Israel a bloody nose, so to speak. So why its popularity is growing. And that's why this campaign of attacking civilian infrastructure and killing civilians is not actually putting pressure on Hamas. It's backfiring. It's causing a lot of people to think, well, if this is how, this is going to be the end result of occupation, then I'm going to be with the people who fight. And that's the stuff that I talked about in the video that you showed at the beginning. The conclusion was that Tarek Makoni said that as long as there's an occupation, people are always going to fight occupation. And there's nothing historically exceptional about Hamas in that sense. Everywhere you go in the world throughout history, wherever there's been an occupation or a foreign occupation, there's been some kind of local resistance. You don't have to always agree with the tactics. But again, every single entity that fought for national liberation has been framed in a way very similar to the way Hamas is being framed right now in the West. So, this notion that the Biden administration has of the day after, it's farcical because they're not rooted in reality. What's interesting is the Israelis, on the other hand, are like, everything you're saying about bringing the PA back is a red line. No, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
Yeah,
that's not going to happen.
You have the Israeli government outflanking the Biden administration, saying absolutely not. The PA is also done. They're also dead. Abbas is also a terrorist, and that that they're not going to control. That's a non-starter that they're going to control the Gaza Strip, which is ironic because it is closer to reality with respect to what the Palestinians want, from the exact opposite direction, of course. And how do you not hear the Palestinians? Sure, you're conditioned into not hearing them. That's fine, right? That's like regular American modus operandi. But how the do you also how do you not hear what your partners and your security partners are saying? And you're just like, nah, it's fine. We're just going to put this incredibly unpopular figurehead that is seen as a corrupt part of the putting a Palestinian face on the Israeli occupation. Basically, we're gonna get those guys that are profoundly unpopular to run and manage Gaza. That is, if Israel ever stops pummeling Gaza into the fucking ground to begin with. I feel like that mismatch, though, in communications has to get people to recognize that this is, unsustainable.
I mean,
I don't know.
yeah. I mean, that for me, that is the key there, right? Because what the Biden administration seems to be doing is kind of genuinely like unmoored from reality. Like the Palestinians don't want the solution that you're trying to impose. And this notion that you're going to impose Mahmoud Abbas on a Gaza where Hamas is not defeated, because that's the other thing where the Israelis seem unmoored from the Americans seem unmoored from reality, is this notion that it's just a matter of time before Hamas is defeated. It's been 70 days and these guys show absolutely no sign of collapse. But then your partner in this, the Israelis, are saying absolutely not to the only plan that you have. So where is this going to lead, right? And to now, until now, it seems like the Biden administration is stuck in one gear. They're looking at this from a very one-dimensional point of view and unable to realize that this shit is not sustainable. You're saying to the Israelis, I think the red line that the U.S. has put on public is there won't be a permanent reoccupation of Gaza. There won't be any annexation of Gaza's land by Israel, and there won't be any settlements. But that's the stuff that the Israelis are saying, right? Netanyahu just said it yesterday. There's going to be a permanent Israeli security control over Gaza. So
he also flexed that he blocked it. He blocked the Palestinian statehood for 30 years, which we've said so many times over, and yet Americans or the American leadership is just not. They're refusing to communicate that or refusing to hear that. Sorry, go ahead. It's just really fucking stupid.
It's funny to me how much of it, because when you follow Israeli politics and Palestine for so long, there's a lot of stuff in there that happens and it doesn't shock you, and then you realize it shocks the rest of the world, and it's a little confusing. So this thing where Netanyahu yesterday said, I blocked the creation of a Palestinian state, and I was right, it made all these headlines in in Western media. They were like, he said it. I'm like, he's been saying it.
Yeah, he's always been. He ran on it. He ran on it.
This is what he ran on. Platform.
Yeah,
but there's this weird kind of like sticking to a narrative that a lot of American and British and European journalists have and politicians have about Israel that just refuses to deal with what the Israelis themselves are telling you. It's insane to me.
It's just we're far removed from it. We're very far away from it, and also we're just like preconditioned towards like death and destruction of a Muslim population or Arab population in general. So like to us, it's very easy to just like champion more war in the area because like that's permanent from the American position. That's why I talked about this before. The hostage posters played the exact opposite role in propaganda in America as it did in Israel. The hostage posters are being ripped away in Israel by Benjamin Netanyahu's supporters because they thought you're f***ing up our operations by pestering the war cabinet with these ridiculous demands that we must save the hostages. Whereas in America, the hostage posters were playing the exact opposite role, which was, continue bombing and reducing Gaza to rubble. Do not ask for a ceasefire. That actually is anti-Semitic, which doesn't make any sense. Like, if you want the hostages to be released, you have to stop. Even logistically, you have to stop bombing Gaza. There's no other way to do it.
Yeah, how are you going to get them out when they're being bombed?
Yeah, and now they're directly killing them beyond blowing them up. So, yeah. Very frustrating stuff. But Mohammed, is there anything else you wanna say before I let you go? Sorry for taking up so much of your time. This was incredible.
No, man, I really appreciate this. It's been a great talking to you. And I hope I hope people watch the video and kind of just sit with it a little bit, because when we set out to create this video, we came at it from this perspective of there's such a fundamental misunderstanding of this group, their goals, their popularity, what drives people to support them, what drives them to fight. There's such a kind of one-dimensional look at them, right? It's just like, oh, these mass Islamic terrorists, without a notion that they were born in a very specific historical context. They're actually a pretty rational political actor who've made overtures to the Israelis, to the West, who've managed to create some kind of balance of power with their adversaries, and compromise on their positions, and are like you said, administratively very unpopular, as most
Yeah.
governments are around the world. But there's also this separation. Even people who despise their rule support their resistance to Israeli colonization. And so, I'd love for people to kind of really kind of watch that video, take a minute to sit with the stuff you learn from it, and compare it to what you've been told and what you've thought about this situation before. So I appreciate you, man, giving us the chance to talk about this in general, but also playing it for people watching.
Oh, yeah. All right. Thank you so much for coming on, Mohammad Alsaafin.
Yep.
Go check out his latest video on Al Jazeera. What does Hamas actually want? We just watched it earlier. Thank you. Have a good one.
Appreciate you, man. Take care.
Bye. All right. That was like I said, Mohammad Alsaafin of Al Jazeera. Very informative video about what does Hamas actually want. I think that it's a pretty good video overall. It shows, even if you are understandably against Hamas and ideologically not aligned with Hamas, I myself am not, you understand that they are simply an expression of Palestinian resistance. And in order to better understand the Palestinian emancipatory efforts, you have to understand, no matter what the faction is, what their goals are, what their motivations are, and why their popularity increases. This is just basic intellectual curiosity. I absolutely hate that basic intellectual curiosity is cast aside in an effort to cut propaganda that favors the occupying entity in this matter.